Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today. Yes, I lead a group of basically about 5 or 6 staff, and the rest of them are postgraduate students that we've had over the last 20 years, and we have a lot of visiting interns and people who come from overseas who work in our research program. And what I wanted to do was just go through and talk a little bit about some drivers of climate change. I've been working on climate change for about 25 years because I did my postdoc in the UK and climate change was an issue. What have been the agricultural responses? What are the global? We've got global issues. What are our local responses? The production results out of our legume-based systems, and forestry, friend or foe. I was asked to talk about land management, and I'm not a forester, but I thought I'd just throw up some ideas to, spark a few questions after lunch, and try and indicate to you that I think there are options for financially, socially, and environmentally resilient systems for adapting to and dealing with climate change. And why I think legumes can be the basis for greenhouse gas mitigation in our sheep and beef sector. When I started working on climate change, the ambient CO2 was 350 parts per million. It's now about 417, and that's not going to change. Effectively, the world's energy supply came from traditional biofuels, that's burning wood. This is coal, this is oil, and this is natural gas. So today we will burn more fossil fuel and transform fossil carbon into atmospheric carbon than we did yesterday, and tomorrow we will do it again. The second derivative is positive. So despite all the talk, and we're in a little microcosm climate down here at the bottom of the world, we get excited about alternative energy sources, that's the reality. That's nuclear. Interestingly, the only time that the environmental movement and the fossil fuel industry come together is when they want to oppose nuclear energy, because it's the only clean energy that we have. The waste out of it is very minimal. Here is RES. That's the hydro, wind, solar that we have, and you can see effectively they are making very little impact on a global context to the production of CO2. And the Antarctic ice loss took a while to happen, but since about 2008 has been measurable. And the second line there, you can see why Donald Trump wanted to buy Greenland. Effectively, it's opening up fossil fuel opportunities for him and his cohort. And the driver of that is population. The population growth is almost a one-to-one relationship between how much energy is required and the population growth. Things we don't tend to want to talk about. There's the population growth. It took us to 1927 to get 2 billion people on the planet. It took us to 1960, about when I was born, I'm not quite that old, but 1960 to get 3 billion. At that point, most of the global population had been fed by an increase in land area or deforestation. Since 1960, that flattened off quite a bit. We got our 4th million by 1974. And then we started the Green Revolution, the much maligned but happily fed, maligned by people with a full belly, Green Revolution. And the Green Revolution intensified agricultural land use, nitrogen and irrigation. Most of that irrigation development was in the developing countries. Nitrogen use here has enabled us to not deforest the landscape. By 1987, we had 5 billion people, and we started to see the real benefits of that green revolution when the genetics kept up. So the wheat and maize yield increases that allowed us to feed that population. We now have 7.6, 7.7 billion if you go for this year, people on the planet, and we are continuing to have to feed them. And you're just starting to see a kick up here as we start seeing Western Europe absolve its responsibility of feeding people and suggest that it all should be done out of South America. And as South America is now deforesting, then you start to see problems occurring where we've got issues here with more land clearance. That's pretty much what's happening. So that's reality. So we either have deforestation or we have intensification. And we've heard that intensification is a bad thing. But actually, we've got one or the other. I can't think, we haven't got another planet. So that's it. The land cleared for cereal production, driven by genetics, environment and management, we've got about 0.6 billion hectares If we hadn't had intensification, we would have needed 2 billion hectares to feed the people that we have on the planet now. That's the reality of the situation we're in. We don't think about that because most of that population is being driven in Asia and in areas that are not Western Europe or North America or Australasia, because they have declining populations essentially, and so they are not trying to feed a burgeoning or increasing population. But globally, that's what we're facing. In New Zealand, our adaptation to that intensification has been the use of nitrogen fertiliser. And I've shown this graph before, and I've indicated that we lose about half of that when we apply nitrogen fertiliser to the land. We lose nitrous oxide. That happens. That is contributing to the greenhouse gases, and we know that from a New Zealand perspective, agriculture is in the garden for greenhouse gas production, essentially because we don't have a lot of electricity produced from fossil fuel. The rest of the world does. The rest of the world recognises the main issue is turning fossil carbon into atmospheric carbon. There's the CO2 emitted in the production of those nitrogen fertilisers. So we need them to feed people, we need them to grow crops, we need them for intensification, we need nitrogen in the system. We have a choice where we get it from. Despite that, we still have this wherever you drive along the Canterbury Plains, and last week I was in Taupo and it was exactly the same. We have this mismatch between the nitrogen we get from a urine patch and actually what the plants need. Because we have this loss of nitrogen from the system, and most of our plants are not getting sufficient nitrogen. Showing that for a dryland system where I've worked predominantly, we have here a typical dryland pasture curve, the Canterbury Plains before it was irrigated. If you just add nitrogen to the system, you can get up to 16 tonnes of dry matter produced. That is the yield gap. All plants are nitrogen deficient all the time. Plant Science 101, except legumes. So when I say I'm interested in legumes and I want to grow legumes and I want legumes to be the basis of the system, it's not just because I like the idea of a bacteria splitting a triple nitrogen bond and creating nitrate for us to use. I do like that idea because I think it's much better than the huge amount of energy that we require from the petrochemical industry to create urea. I'd rather we did it with a little bacteria. We're not going to solve the issue and produce more out of genetics. We've got to the genetic limit of what a wheat crop can produce. We are not going to get huge increases in yield. The crop I've spent most of my time with, the world's most important forage, alfalfa, since about 1990, there has been no yield increases. Once you capture all of the light available in an environment, that is it. You cannot capture any more. It's very simple. How much light did I capture? How efficiently did I use it? That gives me an environmental limit to how much I can produce in any given environment. And this is the situation for lucerne. So we had to do something different. We had to learn how to manage the plant, because management is actually the key to most of this. So here we have a system. This is Bon Avery, Doug Avery's place that some of you will have visited, where we planted some saltbush. We've taken this contoured land and said, we can increase this by recognising the nutrient most lacking was nitrogen. We'll put nitrogen in the system with a legume. And we can chemically fallow as required so we can control the water use. That intensification has allowed afforestation. By intensifying parts of the farm, other parts of the farm can be set aside to grow trees or to grow bush or to allow regeneration in grasslands. If you don't have areas that are intensified, then you're going to run into situations where people go bankrupt. And we aren't going to feed people, and we aren't going to have a productive economy, and I'm not going to get my hip replacement. So for those of you that don't know, I suggest you have a read of Doug's book. But what you may not have heard is that it's not easy. So Doug would tell you that he's a successful farmer now, but he wasn't. Because all our farming systems, most of our farmers operate on this sort of basis here. They know their system, and their system is optimised, and they know the output they're getting from it, and it's working for them. And we come along and say, you need to do this. And we heard this morning, sometimes they're a bit reluctant to do it. So we implement a new grazing, like lucerne grazing. And the transformation here requires some reduction in output. If I give you a new cell phone, it won't work straight away because you've got to work out how to use it. Well, I'm giving the farmer a new technology and saying, go and graze lucerne. And they're going, what? So of course we have to give them the opportunity to have failure, and that is that. We heard this morning about transformational change, but it wasn't defined. For me, this is transformational change. This is incremental change. This is the risk of reversion, people finding it too hard, there being no support for them to come forward and actually make that change. Our job as scientists, agribusiness and education is to provide that information so that the risk of reversion is minimised. It's important that we empower farmers to fail. They must be able to try something and it not work. And we must be there to help them do that. Otherwise we remain conservative and don't change at all. Bulb station, 450 millimetres. We've heard a lot about the Mackenzie country. This is over Matata. This is an example of it working. We went to what I call landscape farming. Now, I'm not a landscape person, I'm not a geographer. I'm an agriculturalist. But I'm trying to create what I consider to be sustainable systems for farming. So, we said, look, why would you want to take all of this area? Let's take where you can, where there are deep soils, and plant an appropriate plant. We'll put the lucerne in that plant. And that's what they did. And when they started in 2008, they were producing 90 tonnes of weaned lamb. They are now producing 170 tonnes of weaned lamb. You can see those transformations as each part of that system went into place. This did not happen overnight. You have one breeding cycle a year. So this is an 11-year time scale. So initially the ewes were in better condition, and then the lambs survived. Basically, if you know merinos, what a merino does is it says, oh, I've got rid of that parasite called a lamb. Holy shit, where was it? Oh, back over there. Well, if you give it some food, it'll actually stay by the lamb, and it might actually raise two of them. It's pretty simple. If you feed them, they're pretty good mums. If you don't feed them, they're hopeless mums. So this is what I call landscape farming. The key was understanding lucerne grazing management. Understanding there's about 2.5 tonnes of good quality feed at any one time on any pasture you work with. If you grow 5 tonnes of regenerative agriculture, 2.5 tonnes is going to be good and 2.5 tonnes is going to be crap. That's just how it is. So we understand that we want to graze at about 3 tonnes. We're not waiting for flowering or anything that I got taught when I was a student. We're getting in and grazing it at about 3 tonnes, about 30 centimetres long. My hands just do that automatically. I've done it so often on the farm. That's when you start grazing, folks. And what's happened on their farm? Well, the average growth rate of the animals was about 170 grams per head per day. With a little bit of irrigation, they've transferred a water right. We're now up to nearly 300 grams per head per day from merinos. You can grow merinos fast if you feed them. And the interesting thing is we've reduced the weaning time to about 85 days. Now that's important because it means the ewe is not feeding a lamb for as long, and the ewe can go back out onto the hills, which you brought down the animals onto intensive areas, maybe a microcosm area of the farm, and they've intensified that area. The hill has now grown more feed. The hyraceum has disappeared because you've got more cover on the hill. So although we're interested in the lucerne, it's the whole farm system we're trying to affect. You've reduced that weaning time and you're growing the animals faster. And you make money. There's a lot of talk today and people haven't really talked about the fact that financially viable farmers are very good ecologists. They're very good at looking after their land, but they must be financially viable. So in this case, we heard the value of land go up as you increase their weight, and that's what's happened here. So from 2012 to 2018, we've gone from making $240,000 out of these lambs to $620,000 out of these lambs. Also doing it on Banks Peninsula, we've got the typical nitrogen deficient grass over here, and we've got the lucerne on the hills. Aerial no-till. Some people call it spray and pray. I call it aerial no-till. What it means is that we're taking the techniques that we've learned in terms of spraying out an area and utilising that area for increasing production on hill country. They've lost a lot of the flat land to dairy grazing, so how can we sustainably develop these sorts of areas? So we need nitrogen to break down the thatch. The thatch that's there on top of the ground has a carbon-nitrogen ratio of about 40 to 1. 40 to 1 means there's no nitrogen cycling. You've got to get it down to 20 to 1 or even 10 to 1 to actually get some nitrogen cycling, or you have a biologically dead system. And legumes can do that for us. There's minimal risk of nitrogen leaching out of these systems. If you go to a hill country property, you'll see the urine patch smeared down the hill. It's so nitrogen deficient that it doesn't disappear, it all gets used. So, is this good or bad? It depends on your perspective. So, is this good or is this good? Depends on your perspective. This will grow animals slowly. If you grow animals slowly, you will release more methane, because the rate at which an animal grows dictates how much methane it's going to produce. This will grow animals quickly. There's about 2 tonne of good quality feed here. There's about 2 tonne of good quality feed here too. But it'll take them a lot longer to grow because they'll take a long time to forage for it, and they're not going to grow as fast as the animals that are eating this. So depending on your perspective, one of those is a very healthy ecosystem that you want to look at. I'm not going to choose for you, you choose yourself. When we improve hill country, we can actually get massive increases, 75% increase in the production of the hill country by developing it and getting the nitrogen into the system through using a legume. But when we do that, we need to remember our basic soil science 101. Surprisingly, we went to the Wairarapa and a couple of my colleagues, Lucas and Sonia, went up there and put in a molybdenum experiment. Believe it or not, molybdenum grows legumes. If you haven't got it, they don't grow. I'd have thought we might have known that. I've taught enough students that wear fancy shirts, but they haven't seemed to take that when they go out on field. Look, we grow legumes. When we do that, we can actually talk to a farmer and we can say to them, you know what, we can identify which legume you should be growing where. And we can say, look, this area here, you can drill that with sun clover. That's the legume that will grow most appropriately on that part of your farm. But back here, we might just oversow some white clover. The flats, you can do what you like with. Crop, do whatever you want. But how do I develop and where do I develop? The rest of it depends on what the environmental or climate areas are. So if you're in the Wairarapa and you get a summer, you can actually drill legume into that. And once you've drilled into it, you can produce a pasture that looks like this, that'll grow animals at 300 grams per head per day. And if they grow 300 grams per head per day, they're on the farm for 33 days if you're trying to take them from 25 kgs to 35 kgs when you could kill them. If you have them slowly growing on that crappy pasture that hasn't got much ME to it, they're going to be there for 100 days. One of those is going to produce a lot of methane. The other one won't, because it's gone much quicker. So we do actually have some methane mitigation options. So we know we've decreased sheep numbers in New Zealand, but we have increased the carcass weight, and we've increased the lambing percentage, and we've reduced the methane footprint. Because we've fed them better. We've actually grown them better. And the way we can grow them better is we can actually give them something to eat that they want to eat, which is a nice, tasty legume. I'm coming towards the end, I'm probably getting out of time. Forestry. This is Mark Bloomberg's slide. Mark basically says forestry is a frontier activity, and he gives this as the example. It's the forester here on campus now at UC. Basically, you can see the development of all the dairy farms up until the climate dictates around Mount Taranaki that you can't grow any more pasture. So it's a frontier activity. Now, where that frontier is depends on what you're getting paid. If you're getting paid more for your forestry land, then some of your previous agricultural land will become forestry land. If you're not getting paid for it, then you'll keep putting it into agriculture. So what we do when we subsidise forestry is we basically change this frontier as to what we're going to do with our land use. And maybe that's the political desire. But that land use change is always distorted by subsidies. And we did that in the 80s when we distorted the land price And we deforested a lot of country that we shouldn't have because we distorted the value of the land. And now we're going back the other way and saying there's actually areas here that we really want to forest. But we're not doing that, we're letting Austrian princesses come in and take the best farmland. Instead of saying, actually, you know what, we should take areas that we want to forest and we should forest them. And we should end up with the wood there going out and being an export product rather than there. Or I took that photo in August. That's East Coast beaches from the forest from that event. Nobody has cleaned that up. That community has lost its beach. That is now their beach. We've also got to recognise that with forestry we're going to have a wild pine problem. We know how to manage it. We do know how to manage this. Actually, we can cut that down, we can put some herbicide on it, and we can grow some pasture and graze it, and we can manage it. We just don't have the will to do it. But we can do that. We know how to manage it. Management's pretty important. In my opinion, Simon Upton got something right. I don't think he got the reforms in the 80s of the CRIs right, but I think he got this right when he said biological emissions should be the only ones we can offset on farm last year. That was his response. And I agree. I think emissions from farmers should be able to be offset by them planting forestry. Not a fossil fuel company or some overseas company coming in and purchasing land to put trees in. Conclusions. Fossil fuel for energy is driving climate change. It's happening. When I first started, I was looking at East Coast chicken beef farmers saying, how will they cope? Well, we've developed systems that they can cope. They are making money, they are profitable. Population increase is not going to change. Western Europe is declining in population, not increasing. That's why they're setting their land aside. That's why they're doing agroecology. They haven't got an increase in land. They've got about 1% of the farmers that are organic and 6% of the producers. But they still bring 60% of their feed from South America. Intensification of land use reduces deforestation. So we have an option, one or the other. If we want to have forest, or we want to have land set aside, we're going to have to work out where those limits are and how we're going to do it. It does allow reforestation. For me, management for legumes and hill country allows that intensification because it deals with the main contributing issue, a lack of nitrogen in the system. That's first principles. So legume-based systems can deliver on greenhouse gas targets. We've spent millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, trying to create a vaccine or breed sheep that are going to reduce methane emissions. Wonderful, great, do the science. But hang on a sec, I've already got a system that will do it. It's called feed the animals quick. Pretty straightforward, reduces greenhouse gas emissions quite quickly. So the only question I ask farmers is, which legume drives your system? Thank you.
Looking at your first Bob Roy slide, which had the lucerne amongst the Matagari gullies and talking about farming appropriate on that land. So we're doing that on our property, and now what's happened is, as we've increased the grazing in there, we're now losing those other areas. Have you looked at, so in between areas of the Matagari and the Tussa, have you looked at ways that we can actually combine that and keep those areas which are quite valuable?
You need to fence, pretty much, but that's the cost. So yes, the Matagari is now providing shelter, but getting underneath it, you've got to work out how to do that. And in this case, you can do a little bit of it by the timing, because of when you graze. So you can, when the animals are put in there to set stock at lambing, then they shelter in amongst the Matagari. But at other times, they don't tend to go in there quite so much. But there's no easy answer to that. The understory is what you're talking about being eaten out.
Well, and actually we're losing our Matagari as
right.
Animals rub against it. It's just we're putting more animals in that area and we're losing what. So we think it's a great idea, but we're losing something that's really valuable. It'd be good to, but then a fence isn't quite the solution, is it? Because then we lose that.
Then you lose the shelter, but you can work out the time that you can open that fence and allow it to be utilised. So a temporary fence could actually, at certain times of the year, you could shut them out, and at other times you could let them in. So you could let them out lambing and shut them out for the rest of the period for the fence. And if you're doing that, then you're making sufficient, you should be making sufficient money that in a few years' time you will be able to afford the fence. No fences generally in high country, you know, the first fence is pretty expensive if it's going a long way.
So can you do with your legumes on hill country, can you do it for dairy on flat land?
Yes. Yes, so we had that until 20 years ago. We had legume-based systems. That's what I got taught as a student. And those legume-based systems, if you can get the legume up to about 40%, then you can get the same sort of milk solids. Some of the farmers I work with are doing that. They sow about 6 kilos of perennial ryegrass, not 26. And they have legume-based systems that they're operating on. They use different species, and they do that, yeah. So you can get that production going out of it without the